gentlemen of the jury, if you have arrived at your verdict, will your foreperson please rise? Mr. Foreperson, could you please state your verdict as to count one?
I object, Your Honor. This court does not have jurisdiction, just as I said. I call for the jury to review the record of the holding documents that they're holding here illegally and they have. The law says I can call on them to protect the Constitution of the United States for a review, and you should review.
Mr. Reed, your objections related to jurisdiction are well noted for the appellate record.
They're doing this to review.
Mr. Reed, at this point, we're going to take a verdict, and if you can't be quiet while we do that, I'm going to ask that you listen from in there. Would you like to be in the
You shouldn't be
courtroom?
letting them do this. By law, you can't even be here.
Mr. Reed, you have one more chance to be quiet. Thank you, sir. Mr. Foreperson, could you please rise and state your verdict as to count one?
Count one, we find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder.
As to count two?
We find the defendant guilty of felony firearm.
As to count three?
We find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder.
As to count four?
We find the defendant guilty of felony firearm.
As to count five?
We find the defendant guilty of felony possessing a firearm.
And as to count six?
We find the defendant guilty of felony firearm.
Go ahead and be seated, sir. Mr. Foreperson, you do say that as to count one, you find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder. As to count two, you find the defendant guilty of felony firearm. As to count three, you find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. As to count four, you find the defendant guilty of felony firearm. As to count five, you find the defendant guilty of felon possessing a firearm. And as to count six, you find the defendant guilty of felony firearm.
Yes.
So say you all members of the jury?
Yes.
Would you like the jury polled? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to poll you. That's just me going through each of you individually to make sure that your verdict is as stated by your foreperson. So juror in seat number one, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson?
Yes.
Juror in seat number two, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson?
Yes.
Juror in seat number three, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson?
Yes.
Mr. Foreperson, is your verdict as stated? Juror in seat number six, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson? Yes. Juror in seat number seven, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson?
Yes.
Juror in seat number eight, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 10, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson? Juror in seat number 11, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson? Juror in seat number 12, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson?
Yes.
Juror in seat number 13, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson? And juror in seat number 14, is your verdict as stated by your foreperson? Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude your jury service in this case. I thank you very much for the time and attention that you paid to this week. You are free to go, and at this point, you are free to look at anything you want about the case and talk with anybody you wish about the case. You may take out the jurors. Mr. Reed, having been found guilty by a jury of your peers, this will be set for sentencing on November 30th at 10 a.m. in this courtroom. You will receive written notice through your attorney, Ms. Weinerbatter, and you are remanded to the custody of the Sheriff's Department until such time. Ms. Weinerbatter, did you have anything you wanted to add?
One moment, Your Honor.
Very good. Exhibits can be provided or returned to the offering parties, and if they could please be preserved for appellate purposes. And with that, we are in recess. Thank you.
Thank you.